Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Felix here with your Word on the Street, and we're continuing our study into the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ. And right now we're in chapter 12, verses 13 to 17. And if you recall from the last teaching, Satan was thrown out of heaven. Michael the archangel and God's angels defeated Satan in heavenly places, and Satan, along with his angels, are cast out of heaven and onto the earth. And it's believed that this is when the seventh trumpet judgments will actually begin. It'll be a time of great horror and death. It's a time that is considered to be like the worst Holocaust the world has seen, where millions upon millions will be killed for their faith in Christ as they become believers, tribulation saints, after the rapture of the church, okay? And that's what they're going to be known as, tribulation saints. So let's open up our Bibles to Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 to 17, in a teaching entitled, The Woman Persecuted. And John writes in verse 13, Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times and a half a time, okay? That's 3.5 years, from the presence of the serpent. And then in verse 15, so the serpent spewed out water of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And then verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And then finally in verse 17, John writes that the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So this is the last part of chapter 12. And it's interesting, in Genesis 3, in the fall of man, we're shown how the woman, the serpent, and the seed all met in the Garden of Eden, okay? And the promise by God that the seed will destroy the serpent was made there. And here in this passage, we can see that Satan was cast out of heaven, and he makes war with the woman, being Israel, and that the seed will destroy him. And Satan he's on limited time here, and he will do all that he can to destroy man. Jew and Gentile believers are going to be just brought up during this time, and he's going to destroy them. John gives us 4 points in this passage, okay? First, in verse 13, John said that now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. And then, so as we look at that, okay, Satan's going to be coming after Israel. It's known as the woman, and all the believers who refuse to follow Satan. He's going to be coming with them with everything that he has. These killings were going to shadow all killings ever known as man to man, as he destroys and attempts to destroy all the tribulation saints. It's known as like a satanic holocaust. And then next, John says in verse 14, but the woman was given 2 wings of an eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she's nourished for a time and times and a half a time, from the presence of the serpent. So God, he's the great eagle, okay? He'll protect those in Israel, okay? And will believers be killed? Yes, okay? Millions upon millions will be killed during this time. But there's a remnant that will escape into the wilderness for 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. And that's what they're referring to here in this part. So the serpent spewed out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And what that means is, it continues into verse 16, that the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth, and it swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And that little short part of that passage, it's where Satan will bring on an onslaught of tribulation just tribulation after tribulation upon Israel and the believers around the world. Remember, the world has already been torn apart by other judgments and other tribulations. And there's hope in God and help from man that's going to assist those who are actually struggling through these times, as they will swallow up help against what the dragon is bringing upon the believers. So people are still going to be helping people at this time to escape. Okay? And then look at what John writes in verse 17. He says that, and the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay? I mean, that only means one thing right there. Okay? Being that he can't get the upper hand, Satan and the Antichrist are going to turn up the intensity and the frequency of their attacks against those who do not choose to flee from Jerusalem. And just like this remnant of believers who will stand in the face of the annihilation for Jesus, we too must do all that we can now and not let evil win. But we have to tell as many people as we can about the saving work of Jesus Christ. We have to give them our testimony, just like they will in that day. Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 to 17, the woman persecuted, and that's your word on the street.